Part 2 of things that stood out to me in Tiffany Buckner's Relational Acuity 1.0 book. I'm on 177 and I already did these three, 156 to 161 and 162 and 174 in the part 1. I'm not really sure if I already read half this page or not, but I'm just going to start all of it over because I don't remember what I last said. Hopefully this goes smoothly because I really don't have the storage space to edit anything out. But yeah, the crab mentality is one of entitlement. It is birthed from jealousy, fear of rejection, and entitlement. Check out the following article about this phenomenon. Hold up, I gotta put my coat back on. Okay, I had to put this back on if it's visible because it's actually pretty cold. I was hot. Anywho, about this phenomenon. No, I do remember reading this, but I don't know. I'm just going to keep going. Crab mentality is a phenomenon where people react negatively in terms of their thoughts, statements, or actions to those who get ahead of them, even though they don't expect there to be direct benefits to doing so. For example, crab mentality can cause someone to discourage or sabotage their friend who is starting to do well at school, simply because they're bitter about struggling with their own studies. Source: Effectivology / when people pull down those who get ahead. And as you may know, if you have abusers with the Jezebel, Leviathan, and other spirits, they already can sense different things about you. Even since before you're born, it's at least the spirits in them anyway really have an issue with you. So, if they don't end up killing you before you're born, they will do a lot of things to you and maybe even try to kill you after. And also they'll sabotage you. And of course it kind of depends on the abuser, what all they'll do, how far they'll go, whether they're more physical or emotional or both. Usually these people with these types of spirits, they're both physically and psychologically abusive. They do a lot of emotional witchcraft / manipulation. But it also seems like they know that things become repressed memories, so if they stop doing certain things, once you become a certain age, you don't remember them anyway. And of course that still depends on the person. So they may molest you and stuff from the time of you being a baby till 12, and then once you're 12 they'll stop, or they'll beat you up all the time, then once you're 12 they'll stop. Or they'll start once you're 12 and then they'll stop a little later. And that's another thing. These types of abusers also tend to be jealous of their kids. If I didn't already say that probably is the first thing I should have said. And so once you start to get older, especially if you're a girl, once you're 12, then the jealousy really kicks in, and then they feel like you want their boyfriends and a whole bunch of other weird stuff. It's a lot of covert and overt sexual abuse, especially with the females. And like I used to say all the time back on the evidence channels, the thing is that women are covert in everything they do. It's not really, at least I don't think, that there's more male molesters than female. But anywho, again, every consumer, oh no, I forgot something. They also do a lot of infantilization. So they'll purposely not teach their kids how to do certain things like brush their teeth and count and all that, so they can sabotage them and even talk junk about them for it. Like those people that'll record their kids and go live on Instagram about how their kid is 14 and doesn't know how to wipe their butt because they never taught them. And that's something so weird to even really get on the internet and say, but a lot of people do it. And it does nothing but make them look bad. And it's commonly the Jezebelic moms who do stuff like that. It's definitely some similarities, but also some differences between men and women with the Jezebel spirit. Now, if the dude, well, for one, the marine spirits and the Jezebel spirit would be some of the ones that would even make the dude have the mannerisms and all that stuff that goes along with being quote-unquote gay. But really, if I haven't said this before, without sex, there is no sexuality. But yeah, so the dudes who are really feminine. Even the ones that aren't gay and have the Jezebel, Leviathan, and other marine spirits. Like, well, I can't even really use the example I was about to use because typically dudes who are doing the feminine thug persona usually are gay anyway. So I guess I can't really use that example. I don't know. I thought it would work, but honestly, it really doesn't because they usually always are. So let me just keep going. Or did I not? No, I still didn't finish. So yeah, dudes like that, they're sometimes more similar to the woman with the Jezebel spirit, but of course, just because the dude has a Jezebel spirit doesn't necessarily mean that he's gonna be gay or feminine or like really uh, emotional or all that. But that is the spirit that gives some of them those mannerisms that they have where it's like they're trying really, really hard to act like they're a woman. The ones that like they have that certain pitch of voice that they do and that certain walk they do that honestly no real woman does. It's actually not because they're trying to mimic anything. It's really because of the spirit they have that is really flamboyant and really prideful that loves to show itself. And yeah, again, every consumer is locked in one of the 5 realms of a season. Class 1, Rookie Beginner. Class 2, Student Advanced Beginner. Class 3, Tutor Mentor. Class 4, Teacher. Class 5, Principal. Whenever you meet people, one of the first things you want to determine before placing an intimate or not so intimate label on them is whether or not they're consumers or producers. No, I did definitely read this page, and what I had said, I think, was that the consumer producer thing was went over way back in the book, but I didn't write that part down because that's not really what stuck out to me. Okay, wait a minute. Most people will fall into the category of a consumer, and again, consumers are not all bad, but they are typically in survival mode. And while they won't necessarily take from one another too much, they will take from people they deem to be better off than themselves. Okay, so 177, and then 198. Actually, no. I really think I should read this page. Themselves. Consumers can be amazing, loyal, and faithful friends to other consumers, but remember, they aren't necessarily loyal people. Most people, both consumers and producers alike, are loyal to seasons, mindsets, and the consumers who are more likely to have the crab mentality or the class 5 principle. Consumers and the class 4 teacher consumers. But get this, they are oftentimes not the ones who will directly attempt to sabotage your movement. They use what's referred to as in the world of psychology. What's referred to in the world of psychology as flying monkeys. What is a flying monkey? Check out the following information. Anyone who remembers watching The Wizard of Oz as a child will probably remember how horrifying the Wicked Witch of the West flying monkeys were. These monkeys were sent by the witch to do her dirty work, and the phrase has since become synonymous with people who end up doing the dirty work of a narcissist. And like I say all the time when I talk about the Cash for Kids system, the Cash for Kids system staff are not only flying monkeys and enablers, but they're also abusers themselves, of course. And they're commonly in cognitive dissonance. Don't know what almost came out. Because it's like, they work in these systems where they help traffic, drug, and label kids, but then they try to act like their job isn't actually what it is. And that's why some of them, when they do really actually stop lying to themselves about the work they do, they end up quitting, and then they end up with PTSD themselves. There's a lot of people who have worked in TTIs and kid mental facilities, and then they end up with PTSD, talking about all the quote-unquote abuse that they, not quote-unquote abuse that they quote-unquote had to do. And you may even find stories from ex-psychiatrists and ex-psychologists and stuff like that. And yeah, it's really common for people to leave these types of jobs with PTSD from the things that they quote unquote had to do and the things that they witnessed being done to other people. I don't think that came out right, but I'm going to keep going. So, where was I? Flying monkeys get caught up in a narcissist's plan, often to damage the life of another person. The narcissist may use their flying monkeys as piggy in the middle, and that's called triangulation. When somebody... Okay, wait a minute. One example of triangulation is like your abuser wants to talk junk to you, but instead of reaching out to you themselves, they'll tell someone else to do it, or they'll send somebody else to your house. Like, I remember this one person was telling their story about how they ran away from their abuse situation, and how even after they left, the abuse still kind of never stopped, at least not for a long time. They said even when they were like 20 or something, they got off the bus after leaving work or school, and somebody had came up to them and said, "Your mom told me to tell you that we know that she knows where you live." And yeah, that can definitely happen, but that's one example of triangulation. Now I lost my place again. Carrying information from party to party. The flying monkey may use gaslighting tactics, open aggression, and guilt tripping in order to make another person feel bad and weak, whilst shoring up the narcissist, and they're often involved in pleading the case of the narcissist. Narcissists love having at least one flying monkey, as it makes them feel important and means they can appear to be above the people below them on both sides, who are caught up in the messy parts of the drama. Now I'm going to go to 198. Oh yeah, and I'm going to say this again. I definitely said this in the part 1, and I've said this before in other videos. The number one reason for demonization in the Western world is trauma/child abuse. So keep that in mind. It's a big agenda. The physical and spiritual side, of course. And a lot of people think that like the cash for kids system, lower level and higher level, is just about money, but it's really not. It's about destroying the world pretty much in the end and messing everybody up. Because like I said before, the people at the top, they print the money. So it's just not about that. I mean, some people are doing it and they don't get jack out of it when it comes to like money. So yeah. 198 to 199. Familiar story. Oh, hold up. Wait a minute. Hold on. Let me pause this. Okay, actually, I may just read a little more than that. But I'm not trying to read too much because I do want to finish it so I can go ahead and eventually read something out of this book, and I have way more stuff written down from here. Okay, I'm going to start like at lower 195. Believe it or not, a lot of people who will approach you in this event, wait a minute, this event that we call life, I'm not editing that out because I don't have space, will not have a heart of love. They will be opportunists. People who see what you can add to their lives, not considering what they will take away from yours. This is where relational acuity comes in. You have to have the ability to examine the fruits of people who audition for a role in your life. All the same, it is not wise for you to try and audition for a part in someone's life without first utilizing the power of prayer and examination. For example, I like to study people from afar, and I've learned not to rush into any relationship, be they platonic or romantic. I've learned the power and benefits of setting boundaries. Having relational intelligence means being patient, but first you must establish good fruits in your own life. Most of the traumas we've experienced in life are the results of us not testing the spirits of the people we've entertained. You see, one of the most common and ignored red flags is when a person rushes a relationship. For example, 1. That girl who calls you her friend or best friend within days or weeks of you meeting her. 2. That guy who proclaims his love for you within days or weeks of dating him. 3. That pastor who left the pulpit just to give you a prophetic word the first day you step foot into his or her church. No, this isn't always a bad thing, but understand, narcissistic leaders do this in an attempt to obligate you to their churches. Good and godly leaders won't try to prophesy themselves into your life. 4. That family member who you haven't spoken with in years who suddenly wants to reconnect. He or she tries to rush back into the seat of familiarity in your life, not realizing that you have to get to know him or her all over again. That ex who inboxes you using flattery and trying to pry his or her way back into your life. The fact this person is an ex should be a big enough red flag. My point. Don't allow people to enter into your life and into your intimate space who have no ability to love or appreciate the gem that you are. Don't allow yourself to become an object. To prevent this from happening, you have to employ relational acuity. This includes 1. Testing the spirit. This is done through prayer, time, and distance. And by distance, I mean that you shouldn't bring people close until you've had enough time to examine their fruits and learn the patterns in their lives. 2. Guarding your heart. This is done by not relinquishing intimate information prematurely. All the same. So basically, don't overshare. Don't do a lot of things that I've done before in the past. Don't allow people to love bomb you or rush you into a relationship with them. And don't feel guilty about having boundaries. Emotionally healthy people won't be offended at the sight of your boundaries because they are patient and understand why boundaries are needed. Nevertheless, bound people hate boundaries. They will get offended and cast themselves as 1. Victims and 2. blessings in an attempt to get you to lower your standards. 3. Loving God and yourself. Luke 10:25-27 tells a familiar story. It reads, and behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tempted him, saying, Master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He said unto him, What is written in the law? How readest thou? And he answering said, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy strength, and with all thy mind, and thy neighbor as thyself. One of the most valuable lessons and powerful weapons you'll ever have the pleasure of yielding is love. But love is made perfect in Christ only. This is why Matthew 6:33 says, But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. When we learn to love God with everything that we are and all that we have, we then by default and instinct learn to love ourselves. This love is what waters the fruits of the Spirit. It also helps us to be more inept at testing spirits, setting boundaries, and walking away from any and everything that does not reflect God's love. Lastly, relational acuity is not feeling sorry for someone and allowing that person to take advantage of you repeatedly simply because you pity the individual. I'm not going to go into that. Allowing toxic people to remain in your life because you're afraid to be alone or start over. And a lot of people get comfortable in that space, and trust me, it's not worth it. I remember back in 2018, 2019 more so, I just started to really think about things, and I'm like, these people are doing nothing but adding to the situation. And like I said, I think in the part 1, I think that was a video where I mentioned this. I used to talk about it a lot back on the evidence channels, but I always, not always, but I used to be really codependent and have limerence obsessions, which is also called favorite persons, which comes from attachment issues. What was the other thing? Oh yeah, and then I was hypersexual a lot since I was 3. And working through these things is definitely a process, but the other 2 things, I definitely was like, because realistically, Codependency is manipulation. I know your therapist won't tell you that, but it is. It's just a form of unintentional emotional witchcraft. And limerence obsessions and favorite persons is idolatry. And you're putting people above you, Yahweh, and everything else. People that usually don't even like you. And so to get back to what I was going to originally say before I kind of went off into the second thing, I realized that, like, with the issues that I had and the attachment stuff and the hypersexuality, I wasn't necessarily, like, that much of a good friend myself. In that not only was I not really a good friend and didn't really know how to be a friend, but I was constantly playing emotional therapist and unpaid therapist and a whole bunch of other roles for people who really never liked me in the first place and just, like, wanted to talk to me because some of them were so mean to everybody that nobody else would talk to them. And now I really try to avoid these situations. And I've kind of been in this one situation somewhat, not full-blown, with someone who I kind of feel bad for, but I did try to avoid them kind of since, like, the first time I saw them, because I could tell it was going to be a whole bunch of mess. And I still pretty much do avoid this person, but sometimes I see them, and, I do try to give them advice, but they don't really listen. And you really have to, like, don't not care about people, obviously. I'm not saying hate people, but, you can't make anyone do anything, and you can only really tell somebody something that either they listen or they don't. Either they keep sitting around and getting cheated on and then come to you crying about it, or they don't. And I need to blow my nose, but I don't even think I have any tissue. So let me keep going. Where was I? Tolerating evil or broken people because you are benefiting in some way from your relationship with them. Oh yeah, and that right here. There's so much I could say about this. In fact, there's this thing I was thinking about earlier. And I'm going to try to summarize this some way, somehow. There's a lot of people that will, like, tell their runaway stories gone left. They try to, like, scare other people out of escaping an abuse situation. And they never take accountability of why things went wrong in the first place. They'll be like, I tried to run away with a group of people and one person ended up unaliving themselves because the police had found them and they didn't want to get sent back. And I didn't even get out the door. And another person had drugs. And that's why you should never run away. And yes, somebody did say something like this. And that's a summary of what they said. First of all, you didn't technically run because you didn't even make it out the door because your planning was so crappy. Or maybe you just have a really, like, high stress, high watch situation where there's, like, cameras everywhere. Because that's common too. 2, you didn't even take accountability for the fact that you should never try to quote-unquote partner seek, as some people call it. If you want to leave your abuse situation, you have to save yourself. Not try to find a whole bunch of other people to go with you to hype you up to save yourself and put yourself in a better situation. 3, this could be a 4, but I just want to summarize this and not go into too much detail. So 3, people that seem to think that going back to their abuse situation because they never really took accountability for the fact that they were really going to have to do things on their own. They'll be like, well, I tried to run away before and I realized that was big boy crap and I couldn't do it. And I started falling into situations. So I just went back because I didn't really see how I was ever going to take care of myself even at 18 plus. And so I just went back to stay with my parents and get beat on and have them give me drugs and watch them do drugs and have them starving me because I don't really see how I could take care of myself. So I just need to live off of them and for the rest of my life until I lose my mind. Yeah, that's no accountability there. And a lot of people do that to try to, like, scare people out of leaving bad situations and actually helping themselves. Like, living off of somebody who is terrorizing you because you can't step up to the plate for yourself it shouldn't be some type of alternative. And when people tell stories like that to make it seem like I did the right thing by going back home, you're not making yourself look good. Trust me. Anyway, so there's that. Loving others more than you love yourself. Definitely, that's the issue a lot of people have. And you got to get over that. If you ever want to get into any decent situation, you got to get over that. Like, really. Really, really. If you... Nah, let me not even go into that because I only have like 5 minutes left of recording space, supposedly. The Bible tells us to love others as they're in the same manner in which we love ourselves. And that's another thing. People in these religious organizations really like to misconstrue this verse like they do everything else pretty much. They'll try to make it seem like loving yourself is a bad thing. Like I remember seeing this video of some religious dude saying he had quoted this verse and he was like, I don't love myself, but I do love other people. But to be truthfully honest, I don't really think that those two things could really go hand in hand, because people who don't love themselves but claim that they love other people commonly are just really codependent, and they're really just using other people in a lot of unintentional ways. And there's so much I could say about that. But yeah, people try to make me feel like I have trust issues and like I'm just a loner and all that stuff. But I like being at peace. I don't want somebody calling me, arguing with me, and I don't want to be one of those people that is on the internet talking about how I had to go bust the windows out some dude's car and go to no. Definitely not. Definitely not. Although, like I said before, I never really had like issues with dating. It was the friendships. It was the friendships that really were something. But I'm not even gonna go into that. Like, one thing I will say though that I bring up pretty often, that girl that tried to blackmail me with a missing persons report. And mind you, I had lived in another state for years, and I had stopped talking to this girl and blocked her multiple times years ago. So how in the world she found out about that, I don't know. But yeah, so there's that. So now, page 205, if I even have enough recording space left. Okay, wait a minute. Remember these words. You can't talk a demon out of being a demon. Also, you can't fit into the God-sized hole in another person's heart, which that's the voids. And I also call them the holes in the soul and a couple other things. After all, the war is not against flesh and blood. The scripture tells us that it is against powers, principalities, and the rulers of this dark world, including spiritual wickedness in high places, and of course, different translations say a couple of different things that also are very true and could go along with a couple different issues. But see Ephesians 6:12. Consider 2 Corinthians 10:5, which reads, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. Also consider Proverbs 25:28, which reads, he that hath no rule over his own spirit is like a city that is broken down and without walls. A city broken down and without walls has no protection from the enemy. The city here is our hearts. This is what God told us to guard, and an unguarded heart is the devil's playground. This means that a person who does not guard his or her heart is a person who will likely hear many voices. These includes the voices of demons and the voices of people they surround themselves with. This is what makes them double-minded and unstable, which there's a lot I could say about that. This is why I warn people with these words. Never give people access to your heart when they don't know how to guard their own. Imagine telling a guy that you love him, you will always be faithful to him, you will never leave him, and that you are satisfied with him. If you're a man, imagine saying this to a woman. Now, imagine that the man or woman in question doesn't know how to guard his or her heart. So the individual receives your words with gladness, but as soon as the guy or girl is away from you, another voice comes and says, she's only saying this because you are on to her game. You are on to her game. She's like every other woman. I bet she's on the phone making plans with her secret lover right now. Now the guy or girl in question is right back angry with you. Always listen for the sounds or evidence of generalization. This isn't to say that you should cast away everyone who displays ignorance in an area. It is to say that if you notice that this is a pattern for the individual, or if you fit into the category that the individual generalizes, you should be mindful that you don't bring that person too close to your heart. A good example is a woman who believes that 1, every married man is a cheater, 2, every man wants her. Believe it or not, this is a form of trauma. Her trauma response may be arrogance. Please understand that over-the-top, flamboyant, and flagrant attitudes are nothing but the swelling of one's ego. And that's another thing. The Leviathan, Jezebel, and other spirits usually come through trauma, although we live in a Jezebelic Leviathan society, and we're under a Jezebel system. There's a lot of things I could say about that. So, the point I was getting at. Just because somebody is prideful doesn't actually mean that they really think that they're like great and all that. It's usually their way of it commonly goes along with multiple personalities, double-mindedness, and them just trying to lie to themselves to make themselves feel better. Because commonly, quote-unquote, narcissists are people who really hate themselves, and that's why they hate everybody else and all that. So their pride isn't real, it's just a persona, like the feminine thug persona that I talk about pretty often. This swelling was induced by trauma. You see, whenever we are traumatized, we stop growing in the areas that we are impacted in. And Pastor Stephen Darby talked about something similar to this before, how people get arrested at certain ages due to trauma, or they get regressed, in other words. I don't remember what video that was, but you may be able to find it if YouTube hasn't taken all his stuff down yet. Okay, now I gotta find my spot. Growing in certain areas that we are impacted in. That is if we do not get the help we need to heal properly, which is definitely hard to get, and it's hard to find community. And it's like, when you already, it's like you get traumatized and messed up, and then it's hard finding trustworthy people who really care, and then you get into more situations where you're around more risky people, or just other broken people in general. And yeah, there's a lot I can say about that too, but in this particular woman's case, she was likely genuinely hurt by a woman or a group of women who were jealous of her. Understand that jealousy is rooted in fear. Typically, it's the fear of rejection, the fear of abandonment, or the fear of being overlooked. Does this mean that every woman who dislikes her or distances themselves from her is jealous? And yeah, I know someone who has this issue. Absolutely not. And the funny thing about this person, though, is that they commonly hang around those Jezebelic dudes that I mentioned earlier. And it's like, so you already know that you're really pretty and all that stuff. But then you get around these Jezebelic dudes who want to be women or think they're women due to trauma or both. And you act like they're not going to be jealous of you and want to fight you. Like, this is a big issue in the hood, especially these types of dudes and the dudes with the feminine thug persona. They love to fight women. Like, they love it. And yeah. And they commonly still get beat up. Okay, where was I? Absolutely not. Get this. There's what I call the vampiric effect. It simply means that you will become the very thing that hurt you if you don't heal properly. And that's another thing. I think I mentioned this before too. The broken, anointed people who end up slowly developing a high-ranking Jezebel spirit. And these are also commonly the people that claim that everybody that they meet is a narcissist. And sure, you will be a narcissist magnet when you're broken and when you're anointed/prophetic, but some people are just attracting what they are because they've allowed it to take over them. And it commonly goes back to them not wanting to repent for things that they've done, and them having a form of godliness but denying the power, and then some other things that go along with that really makes them become Jezebelic and eventually have a high ranking Jezebel spirit. And they also will commonly do a lot of mean things to people, but then when you confront them about things that they've done or said to you that were mean, they'll be like, well, I never said that, or I would never do that, or I was just joking. No accountability, no repentance, and then eventually they develop a reprobate mind and become the same thing that they claim their friends were. And to be truthfully honest, their friends are probably just getting away from them because they're so mean. But anywho, it's simply no. Didn't I already read that? Oh my gosh. Okay, no, I read that. Think about vampire movies. The goal of a vampire bite was to turn those who were bitten into vampires or to kill them altogether. I thought that was how zombies worked, but I can't remember. I stopped watching TV so many years ago. In this, the woman in question also becomes relatively fearful, but her fear may not manifest like those of her villains. Instead, she begins to see the world through a warped lens. She begins to reason that she is a victim of her own beauty. And this can also happen to people that have been essayed a lot. And commonly, you either are born with marine spirits or you end up getting them from the first essay, and then the marine spirits, or the spirit spouse, will set you up to get essayed again, whether you're whether you're a kid or an adult. And you'll also commonly be attracted to people that have all these perversion spirits and stuff that you also have to a certain extent, who will victimize you. I've seen this happen with a lot of people, and they still, I think I mentioned this person before. Of course, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it's basically she was giving this dude a ride that she already knows is a chomo and has been trying to get with me and is always trying to get with her too. And I had said something to her about it while he was right there. She was like, why should you get a ride but he can't? And it's like, you know this dude wants to assault both of us. What do you mean? It's so annoying though. And then these are the kill all men people. These are the kill all men people. And they seem to not realize that we live in a perverse society in general. So everybody's pretty messed up, and sometimes they're pretty perverse themselves, but they think that because they're a woman that it doesn't matter. And it's like, if a dude was to say some of the things to me that you said, you would claim that he's quote unquote the usual man that's perverted. When really, you're hanging around a whole bunch of convicts anyway. But yeah, let me keep going, because I'm already way over the time limit.